Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Liebenson, and I am here as always with B'nai Lappi for this week's episode of the Oral Talmud. Hey, B'nai.
Hey Dan, how are you?
Good. Sorry for the slight delay in starting. We had a few last-minute translation adjustments, and then we had a slight technical challenge, but all is well. Good to
Good.
see you.
Good to see you too.
Wait, now I see that we're wearing the same shirt, but different colors. So
Yes,
I don't know
yes.
why I
Oh,
was not given that color.
all of my dark shirts are in the laundry, so now I'm resorting to the light gray shirts.
Okay, I like that. That's a nice color.
Thank
Okay.
you. It's not as soft. Like
Uh,
these darker ones are like primo, super soft, but
All right. Well, it's fun to match. So, so first of all, I'll just note that tomorrow is it starts tonight, the holiday of Lag BaOmer, which I guess if we had really been thinking about the schedule for the Oral Talmud, we could have done a text relating to Lag BaOmer because it actually is a kind of a minor, not too many people observe it as a holiday, but it actually has a lot of Talmudic connections, or really its primary connection is Talmudic. And actually, I heard an interesting take on it yesterday. I was participating in a panel, and somebody talked about, and I hadn't thought about it this way before, but maybe this is the traditional way to think about it, was that there was this plague of all the students of Rabbi Akiva that all were dying, and they stopped dying on the 33rd day of the Omer, the counting between Passover and Shavuot. But I always kind of thought about that as like, oh, it's kind of a miracle, like the dying stopped. But this person presented it as basically like they were all dead. The dying stopped because they had all died, and Rabbi Akiva had to kind of rebuild his work with these five rabbis that he ultimately trains. I think it's five. Uh,
wow.
yeah, and so in that regard, it was kind of it hit me much more like the destruction of the temple, or the other great destruction of Rabbi Akiva's life, which was the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt. And that in a way, from a mythic standpoint, the way that we look at a lot of these stories, that there's something there about the the sort of, there's obviously a part about resilience after destruction, but there's also part of it about, like, I was hearing it as like it's a remnant. The new thing comes from a remnant, and that's a Jewish tradition, the She'erit, that there's a, and I always talk about this in terms of like the implicit goals of Jewish philanthropy is to hold on to all the Jews, is to stop any Jew from assimilating, I put that in quotes, or whatever bad thing you want to say that means that they floated away from the Jews. But I've been advocating that, like, that's not really been the way that we've made these transitions in the past. There have been some people that came along and some people that didn't, and the people that do come along to the next thing tend to be a small number, and in fact they often will be the people who were not really into it the previous time, and you've said this a million times, and those people kind of stay behind because they're what you call option one. They're the people who don't think that new thing is the right thing. And a lot of times, you hear this talk that Judaism is going to be preserved for sure by the Orthodox, and maybe some other people will make it too. And the reverse of that would be that actually it's the other people that are going to found the next version of Judaism, and maybe some of the quote Orthodox will come along. And that's not the triumphalist narrative of that. The most zealous are the ones who hold on to it. That is sometimes true in Jewish history, but in other times it's actually quite the opposite. So anyway, that all got me thinking that Lag BaOmer was a little more relevant than I've given it credit for.
That's really interesting. And what jumped out at me also is how that story might lay down over a strategy for raising up, the next generation. Do you raise up as many people as possible? It's also a question for, I think, for us as teacher trainers. Do you raise up five amazing educators, or do you raise up, thousands of so-so ones, or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I think it's right on. So so maybe next year for Lag BaOmer, we'll we'll look at some text. But I think at least I just wanted to mention it so that maybe, again, people could go into this holiday tomorrow that probably many of the people watching this or listening to this don't really pay much attention to.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be a little bit more, of interest this year.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I want to focus on that going forward on Lag BaOmer.
Yeah, so this year, so today, the text that we did prepare, actually we called an audible on this one too, because we were planning to do the text that we're going to do next week now. But this week we wanted to do this text that we're going to do, in part because we think it connects to some of those ideas that we were exploring about the, whether there's a third Torah. And as we approach Shavuot, that which Shavuot is in now, I guess 17 days, and a little over 2 weeks. And as we think about what's going on at Mount Sinai, if Shavuot is kind of the reenactment of Mount Sinai, whatever you think that means, and we've been talking about this written Torah and then the oral Torah being given at Sinai. Maybe the new legend is that there was a third Torah given at Sinai. We've talked about it as the Svara Torah, which is not a branding exercise. In this case, it means the Svara, meaning the Torah that's sort of written into our own bodies, into our own hearts, and we've been working on a piece about that, and this text is going to be the anchor for it. So we thought maybe talking it out on today's show will help us get that piece written, and also it makes sense in terms of where we've been going.
Yeah, and I'm also teaching this text to our fellows, and I'm just totally stuck. I'm stuck in it. So I'm hoping that this conversation will help me get unstuck.
Okay, great. So I mean, how do you want to approach this? Do you want to give any kind of context, or should we first start with this little story, which is the context, or what?
Well, I guess the context I would say is that this text came to my awareness because one of my fabulous students, Joseph Eskin, sent me an email after he left Chicago and he left the S&M Beit Midrash that was kind of our big original Beit Midrash not original, but the big Beit Midrash a number of years ago. And he sent me an email and he said, B'nai, I just came across this text. I think this is something you would like. And it was the 3-word piece of this text that has to do with Svara. And, I'm on a mission to really understand what are the contours and the personalities and like what is Svara, how does it work? And to really understand that, I've been wanting to learn every occurrence of the word Svara in the Talmud. Sort of the way you look through a family album, if you want to learn about your, Uncle Dave, like I want to learn about my Uncle Svara. So I'm looking through this old family album and I'm saying, oh, here's this picture of Uncle Dave playing soccer. Oh, okay, Uncle Dave was a soccer player. I never knew that. Here's another picture of Uncle Dave's college. Oh, he went to college. Interesting. Here's Uncle Dave's first wife. Oh my God, he was married twice. Okay, so I'm learning about, Uncle Svara every time I read a passage and really trying to flesh out who this person, who this concept of Svara is. So this is one of those texts that Joseph Eskin brought to my attention, and that's what I'm trying to get here.
Okay, great. So then, so a little more. So this comes from the tractate of Brachot, which people generally study, in the kind of outside world, the outside Svara world, so to speak, as like the quote, the first book of the Talmud. And this is on page 6b. So even the people who didn't make it too far, when they started studying Talmud, they might have encountered this text. So that's just a little interesting tidbit, including your student. Maybe that was how he encountered it. He kind of started from the beginning, so to speak. But it's a kind of thing where probably a lot of people skip it over, especially at that point. You don't really know that much about the Talmud, especially if you're studying it in translation. It's gonna, first of all, it often Steinsaltz, the most common translation, translates Svara as logical reasoning or reasoning. So, yeah. So so it doesn't mean a whole lot, and whereas, we've said a million times, you it's better to translate it as something like moral intuition or moral reasoning. Uh, Again, it's this kind of we might even call it something like wisdom. It's something like that where you really are it's reasoning sounds like it's coming from your head. It's logical deductions, and that is how a more traditional world sees it. But something like moral reasoning is more that it's not logical deductions. It's an orientation towards the world about how things should be, etc.
That's
So,
right.
the main text here, it's actually very, very short, just to kind of flag people to what your student had identified, and then I think we'll go backwards. But here it's Rava says, and of course Rava is this very important rabbi in the Talmud, and also very important to Svara the organization. A lot
And Svar the concept.
and Svara the concept. So Rava is like the Svara guy in every sense, and so Rava says reward for tradition Svara. In the Aramaic, it is agra dishmata svara, and shmata comes from the root of shema, like to hear. So you explained this to me yesterday. It's basically what we might think of as like the received tradition, right? The heard tradition. Yep.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get a feel for what they meant by that. It seems to be what you understand the tradition to be saying, what you receive as the tradition kind of as a whole, but also what you put out of the tradition once you've messed with it and once you've tried to, upgrade it, fill in the gaps, improve it. So it's something like that, or it can be your understanding of the tradition. There's a passage in Bava Metzia that describes a certain rabbi as having very sharp traditions, and that might mean that he's very clear or maybe able to articulate clearly how he understands the tradition, or he has some sort of large set of clear understandings of what the law should be, something like that. But it seems to be something different than just learning generally.
Right. So, and the structure of this, and again, we're going to back up in a second, but the structure of this is sort of, it's three words, right? Agra dishmata svara. In the original, this em dash is not there. There's no punctuation in the Talmud. So it's three words: reward for traditions, svara.
Right. And
Right.
then the question is, what's the grammar? How are
Right.
those three pieces put together?
Right. So would the right way to translate it, the right way to understand the grammar be the reward for learning the tradition is svara?
And,
Or
and I want to say that's the way Hebrew and Aramaic grammar tends to work. The X of Y, Z typically is the X of Y is Z. And that was the way I understood it when Joseph sent me this email with those three words. And for several years, I was very excited about that way to connect the pieces, because it said something to me which matched what my hope and inkling was about the relationship between at least learning and the development of one's svara.
which,
Okay.
just to explain that, like as you understood that originally, it was basically that if you engage in learning, if you engage with the tradition and action, that your svara will be cultivated as a reward. You'll become increasingly wise, increasingly capable of moral intuitions that are good, right?
Right. It's the idea that learning, particularly learning Talmud, is a core spiritual practice primarily designed to shape the learner into a kind of crash flex, insightful, morally courageous, svaradik person. So
Mm-hmm.
the svara, the refinement of your svara, your sensitivity to suffering and your commitment to repairing that, using the tradition, is what comes out of this spiritual practice of learning Talmud. That matched for me with my own experience of learning Talmud, and at the very least, my aspiration that that was true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always worry whether or not it's actually working for me in my life. I don't know. Am I a better person as far?
Uh-huh.
I don't want to make that claim, but I hope it's the case.
Uh-huh. And then, by the way, just on a sort of a postmodern, or even like thinking back to our conversation with Richard Primus about the meaning of the Constitution. I mean, it's not totally clear to me that just because that may not have been the original intent of Rava in this case, or of the editor, doesn't necessarily mean that that's not a true, and b a fair way to read it. So it's just putting it out there. But the other alternative way to read that is that one is rewarded for studying or engaging with the tradition if one does so, or as one does so, using their svara.
That's right.
That the reward. So you might think, and this is, I think, often a structure that is used in Talmudic study and also in any kind of study, just to understand when something is being asserted. Well, what would be the opposite? What would be the thing that you would have thought if you hadn't read this assertion? So you might think that the reward for studying is because you are taking the time to give to it, or you're being diligent, or you're right.
Or that the reward for being engaged in the tradition is actually practicing the tradition. It's like the reward of it, the outcome of it, or what you get. The important part of being engaged in the tradition is the observance of it. Or again, we have to decide what the grammar is, but
well, no, but I mean, like, for example, like if you would say that the reward for prayer, reward prayer is intention, if that was a structure, reward prayer intention, then what that would be telling you under this grammar is that you're not rewarded for praying if you don't have intention. If you just come and you say the prayers, 3 times a day and you just say the words, you're actually not rewarded, because you're not really praying, or you're not doing the thing that's worthy of reward. If you come with the intention to glorify God or to whatever, then you're rewarded, and that means that ultimately this exercise is about trying to get you to have intention, not trying to get you to say these words. And so structurally, similarly here, you might think that the reward for study, or the reward for engaging with the tradition, is, like you said, just the act itself, that it's inherently valuable or something like that. And you're rewarded the more traditions you follow, or the more traditions you study, the more rewarded you are, because you're engaged, you're taking the time, you're serious about it, you're committed. No, what you're rewarded for is only if you're engaging in that with svara, with that you're bringing your moral intuition. So we'll get to all that, but that's part of what's at stake here, is just what is Rava trying to say here in terms of, is svara the reward, or is svara the basis for the reward?
That's right.
So I think that looking at this earlier story, which is not particularly an important one, but it's the story that leads into the, at least I don't think it's a very important one, but it leads into this bunch of aphorisms that are now then given, probably helps us see which one, at least the original intent, was.
And I want to raise the possibility that my own chavruta, Akilin, raised last night, which is maybe the grammar for each of the maxims might be different. Just because the way we're putting the 3 components together for one only works if it's the x of y is only because of z. Maybe another one might be put together with the x of y is in fact z. So that's a possibility. It's less neat, it's less elegant, but it's possible, especially since the editor most likely gathered these aphorisms from different places at different eras, and they legitimately might have been sort of structured differently to say different things, and they're put together here only because of their similarity with the word reward. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in the Talmud where it kind of gets to some point and somebody says something. It could be an aphorism, it could be a little comment about that where it's like an analogy. He's saying, well, I'm making this analogy, and they say, he just made an analogy to soup. Let's hear all the things people said about soup, and then like, and now returning to the original subject, right? Yeah, a lot of that. So, okay, so the little story here. So they're actually, what the context here in the tractate of Brachot is that they're talking about blessings. That's what it's about, and it's kind of about like, what's the good way to do with blessings, how, and so there's all kinds of things relating to that. And this one is saying that Rabbi Chelbo said that Rav Huna said, one who leaves the synagogue should not take large strides. So it's getting at here, like, you should be wanting to make blessings. Like, you should. So if you like walk quickly away from the synagogue, with large strides, that might appear as if you are trying to leave the synagogue quickly, and you wouldn't want to appear that way. That would be wrong. That would be disrespectful. That would be indicating not of seriousness. So you should only walk very slowly away from the synagogue to sort of indicate that you don't want to leave.
Right. And let's remember that at this time, they're still in a grand marketing plan for this newfangled spiritual institution called the synagogue, which I think they were still trying to get people to believe was real, and like God was going to be there with you, and these, newfangled words you were going to say was actually going to conjure God's presence. And I think a lot of people were not quite down with this new synagogue thing. It was like they were pitching ashrams for Jews, and Jews were like, nah, I'm not buying it. Temple, yeah, no more temple. There's nothing we can do. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So then Abaye says, that was said only with regard to leaving the synagogue. However, with regard to entering the synagogue, it is a mitzvah to run. Obvious, makes sense as a counterpoint. But, well, and so then there's a line from Hosea that's cited as a proof text for this, as it is said, let us know, eagerly strive to know the Lord. So, that Hosea says we should be eager to meet God, so we should run towards God, and of course we should only go slowly when it's time to go away from God.
Right. And now this eagerness is really, I think, going to be lifted up as the real core of, what's hoped to be cultivated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're seeing the Aikido move from the prayer itself to the eagerness just by itself. Okay.
Right. And so then Rabbi Zera comments on that. He says, initially, when I saw the sages running to the lecture, to the rabbis, I guess it says that's not in the original, but to the lecture on Shabbat, I said, these sages are desecrating Shabbat, because you're supposed to be resting on Shabbat. You're not supposed to be going for a jog.
Right.
Right. So he thought that they were doing something wrong. Once I heard that, which Rabbi Tanchum said that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, which was that one should always run for a matter of halacha, even on Shabbat, a matter of, say, Jewish practice, even on Shabbat, as it is stated. And here's another line from Hosea: they shall walk after the Lord who roar like a lion. In other words, you should be running so as fast as like if a lion was chasing you. I too run. So, so he says, right, that initially he thought you shouldn't be running on Shabbat. He was like, you should be running to the synagogue on a weekday, but not on Shabbat. But then this other, proof text, again, kind of not really it's not really what the proof text meant, which maybe, by the way, is good reason for us to be willing to think a little bit, reshape what we think these next lines mean. Obviously the proof text that they're using don't mean what they're saying.
You know what? You remember that silly example I gave about, what if there were a verse in the Torah about driving, and you said that meant you should have drive? This is actually exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it says like, they shall walk after the Lord,
right?
Or roar like a lion. Like this, what they're describing here is that something like, you are following God, and God is the lion. God is I don't know why he's roaring. I didn't look at Hosea here to see the complete context, but it's not at all saying that there's a different lion that's chasing you, and therefore you should run towards the Lord. I mean, it's so yeah. So anyway, he's saying even on Shabbat, this principle is so important that you should always be running to do good, to pray, to do the commandments, to fulfill Jewish practices, and then comes the next line.
Got it. And now I'm seeing the connection between this story, where Rabbi Zera says, "Oh, now I've run," and this next piece. So Rabbi Zera is going to take this running even a step further. Not just you should run and be eager to pray, but okay, now let's take.
Right. So again, just remember that this is the same Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera said, initially when I saw people running on Shabbat, I thought they were desecrating Shabbat, but then it turned out that I realized that they were actually doing a good thing, and now I run as well. And then he goes on to say, the reward for lecture, running. Right. Agra de pirka rihata. And then comes all these other aphorisms in the same structure. But I think, I mean, the way that I would understand this, B'nai, is that what he's saying here is that I now believe that the true reward for going to lectures comes not from the learning or the honor being given to the lecturer or whatever. It comes from the running. It comes from your enthusiasm to go. That's the basis for the reward, right?
I think that's right. That the real, it's like you're right. All of these have havaminas. All of these have common assumptions, which each aphorism is coming to disabuse us of. You might think that you get the reward that you get for going to a lecture is how much you learn. And the more you learn, the more reward you get. And that's the purpose of going. You go to run. And Rabbi Zera is saying, no. Don't think that. You go, let me see if I've got this. What you're getting rewarded for isn't what happens when you're there. It's the enthusiasm that you have that brought you there.
Yes.
Okay, now my students are pushing back at me and they're saying, no. The grammar is the apparent grammar. The reward for going to the learning is the running itself. And I'm not sure if I can. The truth is I want that to be the grammar because that's how grammar works in Hebrew. This is a very odd way to read grammar.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, from the Rabbi Zera story before Rabbi Zera's aphorism, it does seem, I don't know, can you make it work where the reward for going to learn is running?
Well, I'm not so as much of a grammarian as you are, so I'm not sure that I have a lot to massage about the Aramaic grammar per se. It feels to me like just from I look at this in two ways. Like one, just from a straightforward standpoint, is like, well, what would that mean that the reward for the lecture is running? In other words, that this, I could see that you could stretch it to make sense.
Yeah.
And you could say that you could say, for example, that the reward that if you go to a lecture, let's say, if you go to a lecture and you're paying attention and you're open to it, then you will get so much knowledge from it or so much perspective from it that your enthusiasm will increase and you will be even more motivated to go to the next one and you'll run to it. And
I like that.
I mean, you can make it work, right? Like there's a way to make it work. And again, like I think given the misquotes from Hosea here, that's totally legitimate interpretive move. We could say, like, if we were writing the third, the next volume of Talmud, which was interpreting the Gemara, I think a person could fairly say like that, it's fine. But from a kind of plain meaning standpoint, I would probably say it's a stretch to read it that way. And in light of the previous story, where
Yep.
what he's saying is that I thought running was it's like I thought running on Shabbat was wrong, but it turns out that running to the lecture on Shabbat is okay. Not only that, it's actually the running that is the most important thing itself. The running is showing your enthusiasm, and so the running is what's rewarded, not the attendance at the lecture per se. Right?
That's right.
So that makes more sense from a plain meaning standpoint to me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the way it's been traditionally understood. And Rashi, in fact, from the 11th century, explains it this way, that what he says is most people are not going to understand the lecture.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to, they're going to go to a class, they're going to learn Torah, and they're not going to walk away understanding it so well that they'll even be able to repeat it to somebody else.
Uh-huh.
So how could it be that the reward is the learning itself when the learning doesn't really happen for most people?
Mm-hmm.
And so Rashi says, so for them, that's why the reward isn't for the learning. The reward is, for their enthusiasm and going. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't know if that's really a statement about bad pedagogy, or it's a really low regard that the rabbis had for the everyday people. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. Although, that said, given what we've said a number of times here, that that this is a text that was never imagined to be read by the common people, that it may be that what they're actually saying is for the rabbis, the reward is still the enthusiasm. So I think you could look at this in a way that's not Rashi's low regard for the common people. You could say that everybody, let's take for given everybody will understand the lecture, and everybody will, but don't misunderstand Judaism here. Don't misunderstand Judaism as something that is about your brilliance and your genius and your brain. No. Judaism is really trying to cultivate a kind of person who is going to have enthusiasm for the Judaism, whether it's for the learning and as we'll see for the other things, for other things. And so it's really a teaching text for rabbis. It's like, don't get this wrong, rabbis. And I actually think a lot of rabbis that we know today have gotten this wrong, and they do think for themselves, right? They do think that the most important thing is for them to be, sort of intellectually learning and whatever. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying the most important thing I would say is, like, how do you care for the other people, and are you doing good pastoral care? Are you sharing your, whatever? So I think we can get there without insulting the common people. Okay, maybe if we look at some of the others, it'll actually help us again, sort of like put this into context. So let's look at the next one, which is Abaye, who's often Rava's counterpart, opposite number, says the reward for the kala the reward for the kala, crowding. So now the kala was a semi-annual, twice a year gathering that people would, again, did it really happen? I don't think we really know, but at least in legend, that all the people, right, would supposed to come to this twice a year gathering. The rabbis, the students, like, they would be studying every day, but the common people, they would come twice a year to this big gathering, like Burning Man, basically.
Right, and it was before Pesach and before the high holidays. And I think the idea was that here the sages would be transmitting the ways that you should be observing these holidays. And in fact, throughout the ages, rabbis, until America and modernity mostly, when we were influenced by Christian ministry, rabbis didn't give sermons. They only gave sermons or talks twice a year at the kala times, meaning before Pesach, where they were teaching you how to kasher your dishes and how to observe Pesach, and before the high holidays, when they were teaching you the laws of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And that's what a rabbi did. And these kalas were, like you said, gigantic gatherings.
And so on that structure, so the question again would be like, well, does it make sense to say that the crowding is the reward? Now you could say, right, I mean, it's like there's something cool about being part of a crowd, so that is the reward. I mean, I would, think a lot of people that go to Burning Man think that, that actually, you think the goal of Burning Man is to, just just do whatever art project you are there to do or whatever. No. The goal of Burning Man is to be part of the crowd. That's the reward, is to be part of this community. So that could make sense. But it seems also again that it's more like what you were saying just about the lecture. This may be more about the common people. That don't worry, rabbis, that you necessarily have to make sure everybody understands everything. No. They're, even if they mess up their Passover dishes, the reward for going to the Kala is that you went. It's that you participated in the crowd, not that you necessarily got in.
And I don't like crowds, and I can imagine a lot of people didn't like crowds and still don't like crowds and were resistant to going because, ew, this is going to be hot and sweaty and uncomfortable and icky. And maybe this was also a PR campaign to tell the rabbis, this is what you should tell people, remind people that the reward they get is for them tolerating and suffering and dealing with that crowding. That's precisely what they get the reward for, not, the halachas they're going to learn about Pesach, maybe.
Yeah, no, I like that. That actually accords also with members of my family that that don't like crowds. Yeah, so you get a reward for being willing to deal with the crowd in order, because again, you're showing enthusiasm for the material, the content, by being willing to deal with a crowd. So let's skip this Svara one so we can look at the other ones, and then we'll come back to it. So Rav Papa said, reward for house of mourning, silence. So how do you? So I mean, how do you the reward for going to a house of mourning, right? For like making.
Let's raise it up to see the Hebrew, because the Hebrew is really interesting. A house of mourning is a be tamya or tamaya, and what's interesting about the root tamaya is that it comes from not tameh, impure, but ta'am, reason. And there's a lot of debate about why exactly a house of mourning is called a house of reason, or could it be something else? But one possibility, and Jastrow brings this down, is that the dictionary is that a house of reason is the name for a shiva house, because one of the things that happens when someone dies is you're looking for a reason. Why did this happen? And I think the Hava Amina here, the thing that you might have thought is the way to be a good comforter, the way to make a good shiva call is, to make comforting explanations of why this happened and why it's for the best. He's out of pain now, or he's in a better place, or, whatever. And actually that's not consoling. And I think this aphorism of Rav Papa's comes to say, explaining why it happened, even though that's what a shiva house is called, the house of explaining why, is really not what you should be doing. And you don't get reward for giving the best answer for why it's really right, that your beloved person died, but rather shtikuta, silence.
That's great. That's really interesting. I mean, another thing that it makes me think of, but I don't know if this is right, but that if you say, I don't really like to go to a shiva house because I never really know what to say, and I don't know the person so well, and I make awkward jokes or whatever, and I just, I know that's not the right thing. So I just go there and I just sit silently, and then I leave. And if I really done anything, and you can kind of say, well, this is saying, yeah, not only have you really done anything, but your willingness to kind of sit through that awkward silence, that is the reward. So I say it that way in the sense that similar to the crowds at the Kala, that your reward is coming because you're doing something uncomfortable. In one case, dealing with a crowd, in another case, dealing with silence. And that actually is uncomfortable, your reward comes because you embrace the discomfort and you did the right thing anyway. The right thing in one case being to visit a mourner, and in another case to attend the kala. You would have thought that your reward is going to come because you actually got learning from the kala, or because you actually comforted the mourner with your words. No, your reward is coming for showing up, and despite the obstacle, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I wonder, because now I hadn't really sort of thought about it in terms of that. So now I wonder if this is going to help us, or even maybe depressingly make us think this Svara issue is something else. But let's keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
So the reward for fasting, charity. And you explained this one to me. Yeah, that you want to explain that one?
Yeah, so I'm still fleshing it out, and the commentators say somewhat different things about what this could mean, from Rashi to the Maharsha. So one understanding is that a fast, you misunderstand a fast if you think the fast is about an ascetic, self punishing activity for your own spiritual growth. You've completely missed the point if you think that's what it's about. A fast is actually there's a tradition, and the halacha is that you give tzedakah after a fast. I have to confess that I didn't know that. I didn't know that was always tied to that mitzvah was always tied to a fast. Turns out it is. And I think the message here is that you're wrong to think the fast is about the fast. The fast is about the tzedakah at the end of the fast.
And the tzedakah comes from the money that you would have spent on the food.
Exactly. So you might say, hey, I didn't eat or drink this whole day. I saved the money I would have spent at Starbucks. I saved my grocery bills. Actually, I benefited by about $100 today. That's now growing my bank account. That's great. But no, you shouldn't think that. You should take that money that you actually saved by doing the fast, and that's the money you have to give to tzedakah, meaning to poor people who were also fasting, and they started the fast hungry, and that fast was an even more sort of painful experience for them. You should that's what the fast was really about. It's a little bit of a wealth redistribution technology, not so much. I think what I used to think was that the fast was about an empathy exercise. I'm going to fast, so I'm going to know what it feels like to be hungry, so that I will be moved to relieve the hunger of others. But it may not be that. It may be just wealth redistribution. You're going to spend a day not spending money you would have spent, so that you can now share that with other people. You're not any worse off financially than you would have been if you had spent that $100 on food. And now those people who had no money now have $100. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, by the way, I think you maybe are spending a little too much at Starbucks. But we'll talk about that after.
I am.
And in the structure of what we're trying to tease out here, the reward for fasting, you would have thought that the reward for fasting was because you were focused on your prayers, you were more, either you empathized or you somehow caused your body to suffer and therefore you did something good. No, it's, you only get the reward if you end up giving that money that you saved to charity or something. And now, does this accord with that structure that says maybe that you only are rewarded if you do like the hard thing that's uncomfortable? Like, it's a little not quite as close, but I mean, I do think a lot of people don't, they don't give charity, or it's not what they really want to do. They also don't want to fast, but I don't know. Maybe that's a little harder.
I'm not sure if the thing that was hard, it was hard to do. I'm not sure if that's so much the through line.
Yeah, for this one makes me feel like it's not exactly.
Yeah, so, it might just be the thing that you thought was incidental.
Uh-huh.
Is actually central.
Uh-huh.
And like Rashi says, the ikar, the essence.
Uh-huh.
The
Or if
essence, yeah.
I mean, or if we think of the house of mourning, we could say like, look, you think that the person who goes in and always knows the right thing to say, or has like funny stories about the person who died, like you think that's the really person who's doing it right, and you're just sitting there silently. But like, it's okay, actually. That's what the reward comes from. Everybody, it's from the thing that everybody can do. The thing that everybody can do, maybe is actually that could be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, Rav Sheshet said the reward for eulogy, lightning.
Oh, actually, that's funny. I now see the way you typed lightning. I didn't mean lightning as in thunder and
Oh,
lightning. I meant lightening.
I'll fix that.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that's
No
why I
wonder
didn't
you
quite
didn't
understand
think.
when you said it. Okay,
Okay. Right.
so yeah, that's why I was confused, because in the original translation, Steinsaltz has it as raising the cry. That when you give a eulogy, the reward comes from, or is, that the people hearing the eulogy cry, raise their voices and cry.
And I think that is ultimately true, but I kind of enjoyed seeing the root of the word that's actually used, which means to lighten, because I think it speaks to the psychological dynamic that the eulogizer is supposed to key into, which is the eulogizer is supposed to be sort of crying and showing pain in order to stimulate the mourners to actually cry. And by the way, I have to give credit to my teachers at JTS for teaching us that. Eddie Feinstein taught us that your job as a rabbi, when you give the eulogy, is to help those mourners who are doing their best to hold their shit together, right? They are doing their best to kind of steel themselves, to not cry, to, hold it together. And he said, no, your job is to kind of break them down so that they do cry, because that the crying is healing, and the ability to mourn is something you have to stimulate. And I think that the root meaning lightning speaks to the fact that the crying of the mourners lightens the burden as they're mourning. That actually lightens their heart, not what you would have thought, which is, oh God, I didn't mean to make you cry. I didn't mean to make you cry.
Yeah, and that's why when you were talking, said it, the fruit means lightning, I said, oh, shouldn't it be thunder? Because I was thinking that it had to do with the crying itself. So that the sound of the crying. But yeah, so now on this one though, it feels a little bit like, what's the hava amina? Like, what's the alternative? Because that's one actually kind of makes sense to me, that if you're giving a eulogy, that the reward does come from the fact that you lightened the burden on the mourners. So what
I
else
think
do you
I
think?
think if we read this with the same grammar of the reward of X is only because of Y, then it's like you've done a good eulogy only to the extent to which you lighten the.
So not if you just did a beautiful oration where you said all kinds of wonderful things about the person and how their life was, but it didn't lead to that release. You didn't get to the emotional core.
Right.
Um,
So all of these are lining up to really read outside of the normal grammar. And okay, now
okay.
go ahead.
Well, the last one before the svara is, the Rav Ashi says that the reward for wedding, words. So that this is basically that what you say to the bride and groom is really going to be the
Yeah,
determinant.
I think so. I think this speaks to that text that we learned a few months ago about how do you dance before the bride. And the mitzvah is to mesameach chatan v'kala. It's to make the bride and groom happy. And if the reward for the wedding, the reward you get for being present at a wedding isn't for actually having your body in the seat or showing up. It's to the extent to which you used words to reassure, gladden, because right, these people
Yep.
are nervous and anxious. They may have just met
Yep.
under the chuppah,
Oh, right.
possibly,
Mm-hmm.
and have you lightened their hearts? And okay,
Well, also it's interesting to contrast that with the House of Mourning, where the reward is for the silence. And
yeah,
so, because and you would have thought, right, that to go to a wedding, oh, I'm rewarded because I'm there, I came,
I brought a present.
I
Maybe you
brought,
think the reward
right,
is, yeah.
right, but no, it's like basically saying if you come to a wedding and you don't say anything to the bride and groom to like make them lift their spirits, then you actually haven't done what you're supposed to do. And if you come to a house of mourning and you don't say anything, actually that's okay. That's what you're supposed to, like if you, and you can say words, of course. It's nice to also comfort them with words, but you've done, just by being there, you've actually done what is needed for a mourner, but just by being there is actually not sufficient for a wedding.
Mm-hmm,
Interesting.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're also helping me understand or feel a little bit more calm about the word reward. The word reward is really vexing me also theologically,
Uh-huh.
because I'm trying to figure out, it's typically the reward means what God gives you if you do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, the whole gold star thing just doesn't inspire me. Maybe that was how they believe that God was going to reward them if they did something. But the way we're talking about these now, it feels like for at least most of them, reward could be swapped out with the right way to do X. Like what's really at stake, or what's really important when you do X is the following.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Right.
helps me be a little calmer about the word reward. Like, is it benefit? Is it the outgrowth of? No, it seems more to be the essential part of. Okay.
Okay. So now we'll go to the real goal of all this. This
Yeah.
line that says, where Rava says reward for tradition, svara.
Yeah. Okay. So if we follow the structure that seems like all these others have, which is the right way to do tradition is svara, or the real important part of being engaged in the tradition is svara, it seems like it might be saying, you're really wasting your time. You're doing the wrong thing if you think that your job is to receive the tradition, protect it, preserve it, and hand it off exactly as you got it. When you think of that scene in the synagogue, in the classic or modern 21st century or late 20th century B mitzvah scenario, where the rabbi takes the Torah out of the ark, hands it to the grandpa, and the grandpa hands it to the grandma, right? Who hands
Uh-huh.
it to the parents, who hand it to the kid. And the message is, your job is to receive this tradition, to hold it really carefully, like everyone's worried about dropping it, right?
Uh-huh.
You don't drop it, and you don't mess with it. You hand it over really carefully, and you've done your job when you have handed it over exactly as you received it. And I think that's the Havamina here. The Havamina is, you think your job is to receive the traditions that you were taught and to hand them down identically, but no, only to the extent to which you use your svara to mess with, upgrade, change, have you done the tradition right. That works. I like that.
That works. Because it's like it's actually it connects to the root of shmata again. Like I don't really understand it from a fully grammatical standpoint, but to the extent that it has the root of shema in it, and so it's about hearing. So that accords with what you're saying. You think the hearing, the tradition, is you're a passive participant in it. In other words, you should be actively studying, but the goal of your active study is to hear what there has been and then pass it along. And Svara, even in the most conservative interpretation of what it means, it as logical reasoning, is an active participation in that process. It's not just hearing it. It's using your mind to work through what it means. That's the more conservative version, and the more correct version is to bring your moral intuition to it, to bring your own self to it. That can't help but change it, or and then it becomes like a game of telephone where you pass it along that chain and it does change. And in the game of telephone, we see that as a failure of the game, that
Right.
that it doesn't, but here we're saying no, that's actually a success. That, and not only is it a success, it's the only way to get a reward for it is to put yourself into it.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah, that works. I'm liking that now. This is as opposed to what I thought this text meant when it sat in my inbox after Joseph sent it to me, where I thought it meant the outcome of dealing with the tradition is that you come out with more svara.
Right.
That's the other read. And now I'm kind of liking this read better.
Yeah, and the other thing that I just also want to put on the table is that it's possible that it's both. I mean, I don't think that from an originalist standpoint, all the other ones are both, right? You're not saying that the reward for going to a house of mourning is that you become more silent, although maybe that you become more comfortable with silence.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And the reward for going to a wedding where you're always, once that you're supposed to say something to the bride and groom, you become better at words. You become so there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What if the way, like, the spiritual practice of going to a wedding is actually there not for the benefit of the bride and groom, but for the guests who have the opportunity to cultivate their ability to, and attentiveness to, and sensitivity to the need to use words to bring happiness. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we go, yeah, right. And I mean, like, you could even say going to the Kala, if you don't like crowds, one of the rewards is that you're going to feel more comfortable with crowds, right? I mean, so these can work in that regard. And then what you're saying is that it's both, that you're only rewarded for your engagement with the tradition if you do so not passively, not as an object of it, or I don't know if that's the right word, but somebody who just thinks that they're supposed to do what the rule book says. You're only rewarded if you engage with it on a deeper svara level. And as you do so, your svara will be cultivated and will grow, and you'll be a more svaradika person, like you say.
I like that a lot.
I think it works.
It does.
Is there anything missing from your original sort of perspective once we get there?
I'm just feeling like it's hard for me to have something mean two different things. Uh-huh. It's like, I want to use it, I want to teach it to my students with a message, and I'm not sure what the message is. They're two very different messages, and I'm just not sure how to live with both of them, mm-hmm. or if I should just settle on one.
I'm not sure. Okay, so I wanna just try to contribute to you now, and then maybe we'll leave it and let folks think about it. But like, I don't know that it's two different messages, actually. Like, when you think about it that way, I think it's saying that there's this kind of virtuous cycle. There's a feedback loop.
Yes.
And even if you have no svara, meaning, let's say that you're a child. I mean, I don't think a child has no svara, but like, let's say that you're the youngest child, like you would be thought that you're a person who doesn't have, what do you know morally, whatever. But if you're taught from day one, the way to approach a Jewish text is to bring your own sense of right and wrong to it, your own sense of moral intuition to it, then even when you don't have that much yet, arguably, you learn to do that from the very beginning, and that in itself cultivates your moral intuition, right? And then over the course of your life, and so it is what you were saying. It is the way that we cultivate svara, but it's also that we say to somebody, and it goes to that thing about like if you only know Aleph and Bet, you teach Aleph, like that
Bet.
you you teach Bet.
If you know only Aleph and Bet. If you only know Aleph, you teach Aleph. You know Aleph and Bet, you teach Aleph and Bet, right?
Oh, okay. I thought you had to say a chapter ahead of the class, but no, but so that idea that we actually throw you into the deep water immediately, that there's not some sense that you have to wait around until you have svara before you're authorized to be a full learner, a full participant in this. And by the way, I say this with full consciousness that this may be our third era gloss on this text, which I again feel empowered to do all the time, but especially here where they've just done that to Hosea. So, I'm not saying for sure that's what Rava meant, but I think it's a very fair reading.
I love that. I love that. So now it's not two disparate things. It's the feedback loop. That really helps me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah.
We got somewhere.
Yeah, we did.
All right, now let's write it up.
Okay.
Okay.
That was fun.
Yeah, so we'll see everybody next week where we'll go to the text that we were planning to do this week, which is very related. So it's all related.
It is.
See you then.
All
Happy
right,
luck,
thanks.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.